This is video number 3, collecting information and keeping good research notes. This is the video where we talk about how to use your note cards and how to use the source collection document and the note cards together. So your first 4 note cards look like this. The first one says number 1 and then 2, 3, and 4. The first one's pretty simple. You're going to put your name on it and you're going to put your topic on it. This is important so that your whole stack of cards can be identified if it's all together, and it's just better for keeping track. The other thing is, at the top of each card, if you would put your topic, that would be really helpful, because if for some reason one of your cards escapes from your pile, we'll be able to try to track down who it belongs to. So please do that to all the cards. The first card that has a question on it is number 2. The question says, describe the barrier in history. Is it a physical barrier, a mental barrier, or a challenge to the way people think? If you're doing a topic that's about the civil rights movement, your barrier is going to be something like discrimination, racism, maybe Jim Crow laws, and like the separate but equal in education idea that was in existence in the United States. If you do a LGBTQ topic, you want to talk about discrimination and also laws that were in place to keep gay people from having equal rights in our country. Same thing with anything in sports where they were the first Hispanic or African American or woman to do something. Talk about what things were like before and why people thought they shouldn't do that, or why they didn't get the opportunity before then. Our topic is a little bit different. If I'm answering this honestly, it was probably a mental barrier in terms of developing nuclear weapons. So I'm going to write it was a mental barrier. And I'm going to go into this source that I found. It's a Smithsonian Magazine article, which talks a little bit about the first nuclear chain reaction, which is those 3 German scientists who discovered nuclear fission. So I read this article and I went through, and it's basically, I'm going to sort of summarize what it says in here on my card. I'm not going to use the exact wording, although every once in a while it might be appropriate to copy exact wording from a source. I'm going to try to do something called paraphrasing. So it says, over Christmas vacation 1938, physicists Meitner, Frisch, and received puzzling scientific news in a private letter from nuclear chemist Otto Hahn. When bombarding uranium with neutrons, Hahn had made some surprising observations that went against everything known at the time about the dense cores of atoms, their nuclei. Basically, they would split in half, or fission, producing 2 new nuclei called fission fragments, and this process releases a huge amount of energy, and it could be this new form of energy. They wanted to figure out how to use it for energy, but also perhaps as a weapon. Okay, so that's really what I need for this to answer this question. So I'm going to go back to the question. So it's a mental barrier. Before 1938, scientists did not know that if you bombard the nucleus of an atom with, what did they use? I gotta go back. When bombarding uranium with neutrons. Okay, neutrons. Neutrons. And I have to say, bombard the nucleus of a uranium atom with neutrons. It splits into fission, and that creates a lot of energy, period. Okay, so that is the barrier. The barrier was we didn't know about it, and now we do. the other barrier, if I'm looking at the Manhattan Project information, was that the United States didn't yet have a functional atomic weapon. And so the creation of the Manhattan Project specifically was to get some scientists together and also military personnel and create that atomic weapon because they were afraid that the German scientists had already done this because they had been studying it since the 1930s. So I'm going to add a second piece of information here. I'm going to say America, oh, not in that font, I'm not. America created the Manhattan Project to make sure we developed an atomic weapon before the Germans. Okay, so I have information from two different sources on this card. So let's go to this source. This was my Smithsonian Magazine source. I'm going to copy the link and I'm going to paste it into my source collection document. It is a secondary source and it sorts H. So I'm going to go back to my card, and after this information I'm going to put H in parentheses because I have information from two different sources. This one was from my Manhattan Project source, which is already in here, and I think it's this one, so it's C. So I'm going to go back to this card, I'm going to put a C there, and then the sources are H and C. Okay, so if you do a good job keeping track of these sources here, then later on in your project you will have all the information you need to cite your sources. Also, the other thing you should do is go into your source collection document, and next to C, I'm going to put, hey, there's information on card 2 from this one, and there's also information from card 2 from H. So now I know on here, if I'm looking for where did I use this source, well, it's on the information on card 2. And same for this one. Let's look at another question together. What are the key dates and events connected to this barrier? Okay, well, I am going to say that I remember my source A having a lot of information about this. So the first thing I'm going to do is at the top, I'm going to put Manhattan Project. And I'm going to abbreviate because it's annoying to type it out every time. But as long as when somebody looks at it, we can tell what your topic is, you're good to abbreviate. All right, so what are the key dates, events connected to this barrier? So here's my source A, which is about the atomic bomb generally. I think there are three. There are three major events. The first one is the discovery of fission in 1938. The second one that's really important is the Trinity test, which was the first successful detonation of an atomic weapon, which was in 1945 in New Mexico. And then the last one was the dropping of the first bomb on August 6, 1945. The United States dropped the first bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. So I'm going to go into my card. I'm going to go to my card and I'm going to type these three things. Now you're going to be writing them, so make sure you write small enough. If you need to use the back of the card, feel free to do so. Just make sure that the answer to the questions on the card are connected to this card. If you need extra cards or extra space, let us know and we can give you, we have some blank cards that you can sort of shuffle in between if you need more room. The first one I'm going to write about is the discovery of fission in Germany in 1938. And that is from source A. And then I'll do the next one, which was, and I need to go back because I want specific dates for this next one. So July 16th, 1945. July 16th, 1945, Trinity test, first successful detonation of atomic, spell things correctly, weapon. in New Mexico. This is also from source A. And then last is August 6th, double checking, August 6th, 1945, which was the dropping of first atomic weapon in World War II on Hiroshima, Japan, dropping a first atomic weapon by the U.S. And this is also from source A. So in terms of what I think the three most important events or dates connected to this topic are those three. I'm going to make it a little bigger so you can see it. All of these pieces of information came from source A. This is card number 3, so I'm going to go back in here, source A, card number 3. Okay, let's see, here we go, Manhattan Project. Is this a local, regional, national, or global barrier? Okay, I think that it was a global barrier. Global because no one in the world could create fission before it was discovered. And that is, again, I'm going to go with source H because that's where I learned about the development of that process. It was also a global barrier in terms of the dropping of the bomb because no one had ever used an atomic weapon before the U.S. in 1945. Atomic. Okay, let's fix this. And this one is from here. So that's the atomic bomb history, which is this one, which is A. So I'll go back to my card, and this one's A. Okay, so for card 4, I've used sources H and A. And I'm going to go into the source collection document, and I'm going to say number 4, card number 4, and also card number 4. I hope you're seeing my process here and how we're looking for you to fill out these cards. You don't need to do complete sentences. I have a lot of just phrases and things that only really make sense to me. Feel free to do that as well. I mean, we are going to be looking over your cards, so make sure we can read them. But these notes are really for you, and you're just collecting good information about your topic that tries to answer these questions. Here's the second set of cards. This is about context, so this one is what else is going on in the world at the same time this barrier was in place. For me, I have to talk about World War II, and I have to talk about what it says here in this argument, or in this article. It talks about how it was in response to fears that German scientists had been working on the weapon. Essentially, if you look at also here, the atomic bomb one, it says that it was a race. It was a race to develop nuclear weapons. Where does it say that? One of my topics talks about that it was a race. Oh, there it is. This finding at the dawn of World War II was the start of scientific and military race to understand and use this new atomic source of power. So, I want to make sure that on this card, I'm talking about how World War II and the Germans and the Allies versus the Axis powers, all of that and that context is really important. The development of fission and the development of the bomb didn't happen on its own. It happened in a world where other things were happening. I could talk about the Holocaust, I could talk about Hitler and his rise to power, and I could talk about sort of what brought him to power, but really I have to talk about World War II and that arms race between the two sides. What else is going on? Socially, culturally, politically. So socially is like with people and norms and like, socially, these people were in power, these people were seen as lesser. Culturally, what was going on culturally? Was there art movements or musical movements or things like that? Especially if your topic is in art and music, you want to make sure you're connecting it to other movements in art and music and whatnot. And then politically, like who's in charge, who's been elected. It's politically is voting and laws passing. So make sure that you're looking into what's going on in the world with people, with culture, and with leaders at the same time that the barrier was in place. So I would probably talk about, again, Hitler a little bit more in depth. I would talk about his reliance on science and scientists and how he encouraged that during his reign. So I would do more research on that. How was the barrier created and maintained? Well, for me, I would talk a little bit about the science community and why fission was never attempted prior to this. I probably need to talk about the discovery of uranium in this one too, because before we didn't know uranium existed. This one, if you're doing like a civil rights topic, how were these laws that kept segregation in place? How were they created and how were they kept in place? Why is it that certain expectations of, the NFL made it so that it took so long for someone who was Hispanic to coach an NFL team? So talk about how the barrier was made and why it was kept in place or how it was kept in place. I have a how it was created and maintained, and then I have a why it was created and maintained, especially for, again, those civil rights type topics, like why did people keep the Jim Crow laws in place? Who did it benefit to keep those laws in place? So you want to make sure that you are thinking about the barrier and who it served, who did it benefit. If you have questions about how to answer these questions, please talk to your teacher. What you shouldn't do is go into Google and type in, why was this barrier created and maintained? If you Google the question, you're not going to get quality sources. You really are going to have to go into your sources and read and try to use the information that you're finding out to answer these questions, which is why over the past couple of days we've had you just sort of reading sources. It really helps you to answer the questions if you have some background knowledge about the topic. So that's what we've been hoping that you've been doing over the past couple of days, is building some background knowledge. The other thing that you can do is you can always go into a source and search within that source for certain words. So if you're looking for information about the discovery of uranium, maybe I'll go in here and I'll do a search for that. Discovery, return. Okay, there's one. Where is it? Okay, it's in there. Let's look up uranium. So there's 9. Okay. Okay, this is all after uranium was discovered. So I'll probably have to get a different source to talk about the discovery of uranium, which is totally fine. If you don't have the information you need in your sources, feel free to always look for another source using new search terms that you've created or encountered as you've been searching. So this video, I think, is probably the most important one that you'll watch, because it really talks about the process for doing the next whole part of the project, which is the note cards. So if you don't understand what I went over in this video, make sure you ask your teacher for an explanation before you move forward, because we want to make sure that your note cards are successful, because they're a huge part of what you're doing over the next couple of weeks. Thanks a lot, and happy researching.